This is Anthony Pascal.
And this is Laurie Elster, and this is the All Access Star Trek podcast. Today we have something I never thought would happen, which is that we are going to be chatting with Laurence Luckinbill about Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. Because of course we are. I know! Sybok! That is exciting. But we have a lot of news to get through, then we're going to talk to him. Let's start with the Paramount news. And I'm going to try and explain what I think is happening, and then you can correct me and fill in the details. How about that?
Sure. Go ahead.
I'm getting ambitious.
All right.
So everyone was reporting that the Skydance thing was going to happen. Everyone thought the deal was done. It wasn't. Tony did not write up a story saying that that was happening because he was waiting to see. Now it looks like those talks have completely ended. There's a new bidder on the scene.
Multiple new bidders.
I think one of them is Edgar Bronfman Jr., who's chairman of Fubo TV, and he has the backing of Bain Capital, which even I have heard of, just for the record. And is Sony Apollo the other one?
No, they're an old bidder, although I think they're kind of fading. The other bidder is this kind of the B-movie producer behind such hits as The Baby Geniuses. It doesn't really matter who he is. It's just another group of Hollywood people who are, looking to take a piece, basically. The deal fell apart because in the end, it just didn't work for Sherry, and it's all about Sherry Redstone.
Right.
I could get into the details, but it was, it came down to money and some legal issues. Now people think that two possibly concurrent things will happen. One is that Paramount for the short term is going to go it alone. No one sees someone coming in and buying all of Paramount Global, as Skydance wanted to do, and a big merger, at least in the short term. So they're going to implement this new strategy, which has three big prongs. One is massive cost cutting, but not content cost cutting.
But job cost cutting.
Oh, huge job cut.
Huge layoffs, yeah.
$500,000 in costs a year. Selling off non-strategic assets, BET, almost certainly, possibly some other cable channels. At the core, Paramount Global is CBS, Paramount Pictures, a bunch of cable channels, and Paramount Plus. And that's the third thing they're now very committed to finding a joint venture, not just bundling, but a real joint venture, possibly really selling Paramount Plus. But they definitely don't want to be in the streaming business alone anymore.
Right.
They didn't win the streaming wars. They didn't even come in the top three. So they need to work with someone, probably Comcast or some, Mount Cock, whatever. And then it's also looking like Sherry Redstone, who owns a controlling share of Paramount voting stock, may just sell her interest in Paramount and walk away, but not do the complicated thing where she sells her interest and then it merges with another company. She just might just sell out for a few $1 billion, walk away. And the concern is that whoever then owns the rest could end up getting the company sliced and diced into pieces.
Right.
Everyone in Hollywood wants a piece of Paramount. There was brief talk about Warner Brothers Discovery. David Zaslav, everyone's favorite villain in Hollywood. They would love to get CBS. They don't have a broadcast network. They want those sports rights. Sports is the hot thing right now. Everyone, realizes that you make a lot of money off sports because it's the only thing people watch live.
I watch awards shows live.
Okay, fair enough. There's a guy who wants the cable channels, Byron Allen. Obviously, Sony wants Paramount Pictures, so we could end up in a situation where everyone gets a piece and Paramount ceases to exist. Regarding Star Trek, in the short term, nothing's going to happen. But the Paramount Plus shows are going to be part of this new joint venture, whatever that is.
I'm still rooting for Mount Cook.
I'm thinking that licensing Star Trek to other people is now more and more likely. They did talk about licensing at the shareholder meeting, just in general, not about Star Trek. Star Trek was brought up a few times during this big shareholder meeting. One of the three CEOs, there's three CEOs now, don't ask me to explain.
They call them the Pep Boys, I read.
Talked about how they listed Star Trek amongst the $11 billion franchises and a future $1 billion franchise. And they talked about how there's another movie coming, which in theory there is.
Sure.
It's still important to them. So I don't see them just selling off Star Trek, but licensing a Star Trek show to Amazon, maybe? Sure, why not?
Sure.
The big question is, if they go full on fire sale, we could have a weird situation. Like, let's say they sell CBS to Warner Brothers Discovery. Would that include CBS Studios, which produces a lot of content and owns a lot of IP, including Star Trek? Or would they just buy the broadcast network to get those juicy sports rights?
So if you want more details, Tony's articles are really good. They explain things very thoroughly and get into the weeds. And I say that in only a positive way. So I recommend that you go to the site and read up on that.
But even this business paralysis, the business of Star Trek continues, and things are being announced. They're not waiting around and not doing stuff.
And I assume that everybody's heard the big, exciting announcement about Starfleet Academy. Paul Giamatti is going to be a recurring guest star as the main villain in season 1.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of his. He is a huge Star Trek fan. I wrote an article about Paul Giamatti wanting to be in Star Trek in 2011, and a couple others since then, because he has brought it up, including my friend in Europe, who on a junket he did recently got him to speak Klingon and, do a little Klingon audition. I'm hoping all that publicity got the notice, because Kurtzman in his statement talked about, we found out he was a Star Trek fan. We don't know what he's going to play, except he's going to be the bad guy, a recurring character.
I assume he's going to be an alien because he's just wanted to be one for such a long time.
Yeah. Now, is he an external threat? And my bet is they're going for the Hogwarts type. He's going to be like Snape or something. But Snape turned out not to be a bad guy in the end. But he could be like a professor. So, the villain's coming from inside the house, as it were. He has a connection to one of the cadets, they said. Possibly like the father of one of the cadets or something like that.
Evil uncle or something.
Yeah.
They start filming at the end of the summer, Pinewood in Toronto. The idea that we might get to interview Holly Hunter and Paul Giamatti about Star Trek one day or see them at conventions is crazy to me and so exciting. I think also it's changing the perception of the show, because a lot of people who are like, I'm not going to watch this, stupid YA show, are now like, oh, okay, maybe I'll just turn it on and see what happens.
I mean, I guess the question is, if it's a YA show, there's going to be a lot of young, unknown actors. So Holly Hunter will be more famous, but I imagine there'll be more screen time for the young actors who are going to be the main characters of the show. But we don't know how that's going to work out in the end.
All I can say is I'm pretty sure we all think Mary Wiseman is involved, and she must be very excited.
Oh, yeah. So we are in Emmy season, and Alex Kurtzman did a For Your Consideration event last weekend with Jason Zimmerman, the visual effects supervisor for both Discovery and Strange New Worlds. And we put up the whole video on the site, but he said some interesting things on a technical side, because they were kind of talking about doing stuff in the 32nd century. Kurtzman said they're going to explain why the ships look the way they do, because they're, all the pieces aren't attached anymore. That's kind of their new thing.
Yeah, his quote about it was interesting, because he said, one of the questions that we always ask ourselves is, what is the reality of this? It can't be magic. So what's actually going on there? Which is the question that I've been asking through a lot of Discovery. I think they're still going to have magic, but I'm glad they'll at least try to explain some things. I don't, it doesn't, I'm not a scientist or a mechanic, so you can make up an explanation and I'll believe it.
But you could, I bet, just through osmosis of watching Star Trek, describe how a transporter works, how a phaser works, how a warp drive works.
Well, I certainly know what they can do and what they can't do, and what sometimes interferes with them doing the thing that they're supposed to do. Right,
but you know what a Heisenberg compensator is, what dilithium crystals are, and you know what a nacelle is, and we kind of have no clue how anything works except for the hand-wavy programmable matter. What's encouraging is that the Starfleet Academy show is going to get into some nerdy stuff.
Well, it's a good opportunity, because if you have students in classes, they can be learning how the tech works. And then we can be learning how the tech works.
He also talked about fan service in general. He brought up a good point, which is when you're trying to do fan service, it often backfires and ends up having the opposite effect, which I agree. When it's too obvious, it's like, hey, look at we're doing fan service now, and it doesn't service the fans.
Right. He said they have a lot of conversations in the writer's room about whether they should include a reference or not. They don't just want to throw something out like something without depth versus let's explore the Breen because we know so little about them. And I mean, I would say, like, I agree with what he said. I don't think the shows always live up to that, but I think sometimes they do.
Well, Picard season 3 was very fan servicey, but in a way he was a lot more hands off on that one, to be honest. The question is, because this was in context of the Breen, did using the Breen service the plot? He felt like it worked well with the character Locke, so they started with, we're going to do these Bonnie and Clyde characters, and then making one of them Breen helped the story they wanted to tell. And I could see that.
Yep.
It wasn't just for giggles.
Right. But it was also something interesting that people wanted to know about.
I'm not sure that the way Kiva's using the Gorn actually meets that criteria, to be perfectly honest.
Thank you.
Just, watch the video if you want.
Yeah, it's actually a good chat. It's only about 20 minutes. And I thought it was a fun chat. They asked some good questions and had good answers. The latest on Prodigy. So I think everybody knows by now that we're finally getting season 2 on Netflix in July. The weird news is that all 20 episodes are coming at the same time, which all the podcasters are trying to figure out, including us, talking about how they're going to handle it.
It's not weird news for Netflix. I knew they were never going to do weekly. I thought they might split it into 2 halves, because they do that with some of their other shows. But often that's because they're trying to get content out as fast as possible, and part 2 isn't available. They're sitting on all 20 episodes. The French have had them for a month, or more. So,
I mean, the challenge with that is, like, if you want to keep the talk going and the hype going, and everybody's watching at their own. You have people who are setting aside the weekend to watch it all. There are people who are like, I'm going to do one a week. So it does change the nature of the conversation.
Perhaps. I know a lot of the target audience. I watched my nephew binge like a whole season of an anime series in an afternoon, sitting on the couch, which is, on his iPad.
Oh, that part stings when I think about Prodigy. Don't watch it on an iPad.
Well, a lot of people watch things on mobile devices.
I know.
You should be watching this on a 4K TV for sure, but not everyone's going to be doing that. Now, Laurie and I are still talking about how we're going to cover the show. We're not going to do one episode of this podcast about the season and that's it, but we're not going to stretch it out over 20 weeks either. So something in between that?
Yep. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. We'll let you know when we get closer. They haven't given us the episodes yet, so.
Right. We can't do anything yet. And if you're looking for details on where to watch it in Canada, where to watch it internationally, we have some information, and we'll always keep updating on the website. Let people know how to find it.
It's all starting on July 1st, which is not that far away.
No, it's close. All right. Well, Strange New Worlds has come up again because awards season coming. So Anson Mount did an interview with Gold Derby. And guess what expression he used, everybody? He said, not big swings, but bigger swings.
It's season 3. They can't say big swings anymore.
Right. Now they're bigger swings. I really want them to find a new phrase. However, his point was, he said it's going to be a bigger swing than the musical episode.
Possibly multiple bigger swings than the musical episode.
Right.
He said it was the crazier stuff.
Crazier.
They've joked about puppets before. I mean, I've had some thoughts like, they could do an episode where no one talks. They could do I've seen a couple shows try to do that. A dialogue-free episode, black and white episode, or it could be different. Like they could kill off a main character. They could do major stunt casting.
It could be story. It could be casting. It could be genre. It could be, we don't know.
What he talked about is that they're feeling more confident about the show. He said it's the best season yet. So he's super pumped, and he's a real fan, a real hardcore Star Trek fan. So it's good to hear how he's really into it.
Yeah. And they plan to start filming season 4, as we've talked about, in the spring of 2025. His full interview is up on the site, so go watch it.
So we've got some rare Section 31 news. Not a lot of news, but a mention, a thing. That's the thing. This thing is a black box. I mean, we do know that Rachel Garrett's in it, and maybe it's set in the Lost year. Of course, Michelle Yeoh's in it, but there's a bunch of actors that we know are in it, but we don't know anything about who they're playing. But one of the actors was doing publicity, a guy named James Lau, and here's how he described his character. All I could say is my guy is very, very intense. Without giving anything away, he's a broken soul, and hurt people. Sounds like a bad guy.
Yeah. A broken soul who hurts people.
I don't know if you've seen, he's a good actor. I've seen him in a lot of stuff recently. He's been around for a while, but he's in Barry, which is an amazing show, and he plays a very intense character in Barry. Oh. He was in that Hulu limited series about Elizabeth Holmes playing a really intense guy.
So his specialty is intense guys.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's good. And he said it was a thrill to work with Michelle Yeoh. No big surprise there.
Yeah. So that's all we got. We still don't have a date or, anything about the Section 31 movie. We got one picture, and I'm still thinking they're going to squeeze it in for 2024.
Yep.
All right. Discovery. It's only been a couple weeks, but they've just announced the season 5 Blu-ray DVD set is coming on August 27th. A Steelbook Collector's Edition's coming. The usual special features is only going to be the season finale has an audio commentary. That's the only one. It's pretty fast, actually. They usually don't do them this quickly, so that's nice.
And they're also releasing the whole series as a box set.
Yeah, and actually, that is a surprisingly good deal. So the season 5, which is, typical pricing, is you could pre-order the Blu-ray for $44. The box set is $63 for the whole series.
That's pretty good. And it says that there's a bonus disc, here's the quote, that takes you on a never-before-seen journey through all 5 seasons with the cast and crew, whatever that means.
Yeah, so it's not just gluing together. It sounds like there's something unique to the complete series box set, which is nice.
We have some fun news for the franchise, which is that the Peabody Awards were last Sunday night, and we knew this was going to happen. Star Trek won the Institutional Award, which is a big deal. Previous winners are like The Simpsons, Sesame Street, 60 Minutes. Like, these are big deals. And they gathered a nice smattering of Star Trek people, mostly, I would say, from the new shows, but with a couple of veterans like Scott Bakula was there. We also had people who sort of bridge the gap of both, like Patrick Stewart, Jerry Ryan, LeVar Burton, people from Discovery, people from Strange New Worlds. Sam Richardson from Section 31 was there. J.J. Abrams and Alex Kurtzman and, just a lot of people. What was super nice is that Alex brought Bijo Trimble there and talked about her contribution to Star Trek fandom. She and her husband ran the letter writing campaign that saved the original series.
So they had Abrams present the award, and then Kurtzman accepted, except everyone was on the stage, so it was like just wall-to-wall people on the stage. I thought it was a good speech from both Abrams and from Kurtzman. And then Patrick Stewart, I don't know why he didn't go on stage. He stayed in the audience, and then the host went out to the
Kumail Nanjiani, not just any old hosty schmosty,
and got Patrick Stewart to say something. So he got a little bonus, and he was very moved by the event, actually.
Yeah. Kumail's a big Star Trek fan, so maybe he was like, I am talking to Patrick Stewart. Period.
I'm going to talk to Captain Picard. Yeah, it's really nice. We have a lot of pictures. They did pictures from the event, and then they did this kind of portrait studio thing where they got to hold the award, and there's some fun ones with Jerry and LeVar and some other
actually,
folks.
That was one of my favorite pictures. But there are a lot of great ones that's worth checking out.
Some people are saying, where was Shatner? My bet is he was invited and didn't want to go. I don't know why TK wasn't there. I'd imagine they probably invited him. Who knows?
Or Walter Koenig. I mean, it is interesting, like, I don't know how they did it or who they invited. Did they invite everybody? I would love to know.
Yeah. It's not that they wouldn't invite these people. It's just that who knows, my bet is lots of people got the invites and only so many people could go on that specific date at that specific time. Right. But I would have liked to have seen more behind the scenes people from the old days.
Yes, right. Like some of the people who really shaped Star Trek into what
Brandon Braga, Ron Moore. Yeah, I don't know if they were invited.
Jerry Taylor.
Rick Berman.
Yeah. I mean, come on. Like, I know there are people who hate him, people who love him, but he is a huge, huge part of all of that.
I mean, there's only so many people you could fit on a stage, I guess. But it was a nice event, and Star Trek it's still relevant, man.
Yeah, and it's nice to see Scott Bakula. He doesn't do a ton of Star Trek-y things.
Yeah, I didn't see anything where he talked at the event, but seeing him standing next to Patrick Stewart is the closest we'll get to that crossover.
That was a very shared photo on the web. Everybody posted that one. His Enterprise buddies have started a new podcast. So Connor Trinneer and Dominic Keating have a brand new podcast. Their last one ended. This one is called the Decon Chamber, and it's being produced by David Zappone's company, which does those documentaries, the Deep Space Nine one that we've seen and the Voyager one that's coming. But their first guest was William Shatner, which is no joke. And they also have, I think they've already done Mary Chieffo and Terry Farrell. They're talking to Scott Bakula and who knows who else.
They definitely had a good following for their last show. So I suspect this will be just as popular, if not more popular.
So, and I'm sure they'll be on our podcast at some point to talk about it, as will Gates McFadden when it's time to talk about hers, which we've discussed.
Now it's time. This is the 35th anniversary this week of Star Trek V, The Final Frontier.
Yeah, I know you were all rewatching it.
I was. When an anniversary comes around, I do a rewatch usually.
I rewatched Star Trek 3 because that also had an anniversary and enjoyed it greatly. And then, I watched Star Trek 5 again too. And
it just happened to work out that we had the opportunity to interview Laurence Luckinbill, Sybok himself, who has a new memoir out called Affective Memories.
And lest you forget, he is Lucille Ball's son-in-law.
Yeah, amongst many interesting things.
Yes. So let's talk to him.
I'd like to welcome Laurence Luckinbill, famous to Star Trek fans for playing Sybok in Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. But he also has an illustrious career on screen and especially on stage. He has a new memoir out about his experience on the stage called Affective Memories. A link to that will be in the show notes. Welcome, Laurence Luckinbill.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Laurie.
We're so excited that you're here, and it happens to be a big anniversary for Star Trek V.
Yes, 35th anniversary of Star Trek V.
It's hard to believe, but here we are.
Yeah. I'll tell you what happened at the first screening, which was in Westwood in Los Angeles. We were sitting mid-house in that big theater there, and when I came on screen, my 2-year-old daughter, Kate, jumped up onto the back of the seat and yelled to everybody, about 1,000 people in the theater. She said, "That's my daddy." That was the beginning of the very first public screening.
Did you at the time, did it look like you? Did you have the beard yourself in those days?
The beard was mine.
The real beard.
Oh.
So she could recognize you.
Yeah. Well, I don't have the ears because I gave them away to the Arkansas Entertainers Hall of Fame. They're up on the wall there in a box. And I did have, that was my beard. Yes. I was very proud of that beard at that time. But now, I'm almost 90 years old, that beard is totally white. I look like a bad Santa. So I don't have it.
You had pretty cool hair, too. Was that all you as well?
No, that was theirs. That was Jack Dawn's hair. That was a fabulous wig, and I wish I could wear it all the time.
It looked great. The whole look was with the robe and the hair.
Yeah, I like the look.
Did you keep anything besides the ears? Is that all they let you keep?
Somebody asked, did I keep a call sheet or anything from the shoot? No, I did not. But I can tell you this: I've made 26 movies, and there's only two I can watch. The first one is The Boys of the Band, which I did in 1970, and then there's 1989, that was Star Trek. And there are only two pieces of film that people constantly ask me about, and they're these two.
When was the last time that you saw Star Trek V?
It's not been a close time, because when I watch it, I get involved, and I watch the whole thing. And I've been writing this book for my autobiography for 10 years, and I've been suddenly so busy because it's come out and doing extremely well on Amazon, and I'm doing a lot of interviews, and it just happens to coincide with this Star Trek thing. And I'm so happy about that because I want to talk about Star Trek. It was a great experience for me.
Go back to the beginning. It's interesting how your theater career is really why you got the role, as I understand it.
Right.
The PBS ran your Lyndon.
Yes.
Famously you've played Lyndon Johnson in that, and
yes.
that's where Shatner saw you. I'm curious. You have done many one-man shows with many historical figures, and as you approached the role of Sybok, did you take influence from any historic figures to influence how you played the role?
Well, it's an interesting thing because when I went into the bungalow to meet all these guys, Harvey and Bill and the unknown writer, they all stood up in the bungalow. That never happens. They come and shake my hand, and that never happens. And then they start talking about the story, and that never happens. What happens is they're just judging you, and you're one of 5 actors they're looking at, and maybe they're looking to see if you're too old or too fat or too what, if your face looks good. And Bill jumped right in, and he said, I was in some hotel somewhere doing something, and it was Sunday night and I had nothing to do. I tuned in to Lyndon, and there you were, and you're Sybok. And Harv Bennett was a little bit more circumspect. He said, well, we'd like you to read the script and all this, and Bill kept jumping in with excited ideas. As an actor, it was a very invigorating and enlivening reception to a role. And then I read the script, and I knew, baby, I was in. It was so good. And people have criticized. Occasionally I look at some of these things, like commentary, and there are some pretty vicious commentaries down there about Bill and the show and the movie and all. But I don't ever get criticized badly, and I feel sort of embarrassed by that. But I ate that role, and I loved that role, and I would do it again. I was surprised that Sybok never made a comeback from death.
Well, especially in Star Trek, although they're one of the new shows has hinted that the character of Sybok is coming.
I saw that somewhere. Yes.
Yeah.
There's always a cautionary tale about charismatic figures who can lead people astray. Yes. And there's, is that how you saw Sybok, as not a villain, but, how did you see the character? Who was he to you?
Yes, it was written a bit like a villain, except that there was this search for God. Well, we're all searching for God, aren't we? In some way. We may forget that in our daily dues, but there are nights when you're lying there thinking, what's going to happen? How am I going to solve this moral problem, this ethical problem, this family problem? So after I accepted the role, Bill said, we're going to have lunch, sit down and talk about the part, how you want to play it, all this stuff. So nothing happened. And suddenly I get a call from Bill say, meet me at someplace in Santa Monica tomorrow morning at 7. So I did. We met at a juice bar, and he spotted me to a juice, and we stood there and talked for 5 minutes about the character. And he said, how do you see the character? And I said, Lennon. And he said, John? I said, no, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. And he said, oh, really? And I said, yes, Lenin had a great dream that he could free Russia. He could make it all good and better for the people. But as he gradually got into it, he felt the obstacles rushing against him, he gradually turned into a dictator. And that's where Sybok was headed because he had made that choice. And then he stole the Enterprise. And that was the first big action, which was a theft. And gradually, as the thing moved along, and we got to that last scene where I exchange hands with Leonard, with Spock, my brother, and then sacrifice myself to save him to this evil god, which was to me Shakespearean. It was tragic. And I played it that way. And I played it, I had many conversations with Bill about the rock guns, the only armor that seemed to be on that planet were these rock guns that some had some sort of power. And he wanted me to have that. And I said, I don't want to because I'm the human part of Spock and I am a peaceful person. Sybok is a peaceful person. He is looking for God. He's looking for help. He's looking to relieve pain. Why would he be carrying a gun around? So Bill eventually said, well, we'll fix that. And he did. We were able to do a big fight and all of that stuff, and the gun wasn't really important. I actually love Bill Shatner. So he was a good director for me. Other people complain about him. I don't.
He's talked about how he was very frustrated making this movie. Not with you, but with the studio and with money and stuff. Could you feel that when you were there, that they were, that there wasn't enough money for this thing, or that, like that whole thing you talked about with the rock thing, that ended up not even working out because they wouldn't give him enough money to do it right?
I know. They did mess with him. It was Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom that messed him up. No, on the set, absolutely not. I could tell that Bill was frustrated and in a hurry because I walked up to him the very first day of shooting. I was in costume. I was all ready and to get on my horse and go out to the spot where I was to enter. And Bill looked at me walking up and he said, no more motivational talk. I said, no, Bill, I'm not here for that. I'm here to do the movie. Let's do it. There's so many good things that happened to me in that story, not only with my family, but I have a larger family now that know me from that part. And I'm serious. I'm too old to do anything right now, but boy, would I love to get some more Sybok chops.
Well, let me ask you this, because I know when you got the role, you knew what Star Trek was, but it wasn't something that you'd seen much of. And so, but you're playing a Vulcan, which is such an established species.
Yes,
it's so
yes.
important to Star Trek, and especially with Spock there. So did you know like how big a deal it was to be a laughing Vulcan, and what did you know about Vulcans going into that?
Well, I found out about Vulcans, and I dug into it once I knew, as I do with any part. No, I was not very au courant with Star Trek, and for that matter, with I Love Lucy when I met my wife. It's not a real TV bug guy. I read books.
How do you miss I Love Lucy?
Exactly. And my dear wife was surprised when she heard that I knew nothing much about her parents. And the same thing happened with Star Trek. A lot of people assumed that I'd know a lot about it because I'd watched it all, but I hadn't. But I did. Once I got into the ethos, I began to see things in a different way. And I never met Roddenberry, but I did pass him in the parking lot at Paramount. This big guy raced past me and gave me a wave on my way into the bungalow. And I thought, who is that? And I asked, and he said, that was Gene Roddenberry, just left. And I had enormous respect for him.
There was, talk before you were brought onto the movie, It was offered to Sean Connery, who couldn't do it. And I know there was talk of Leonard Nimoy playing both roles. Did that give you any like hesitation or concern about taking on the role?
I didn't hear that until after I got it.
Oh,
I'll tell you what happened though. It did put a bug in my ear about Leonard for about 2 seconds because I knew he wanted it, and who wouldn't want to play a dual role. But the actual facts were that Leonard was a bit old to be playing both these parts, and not only that, I think physically he was probably not. He was probably a little bit too tired to do that at the time, and DeForest was actually in his vital decline, as you might know, and so those things are just Hollywood BS. You know, they run through the whole of all of the film. I could tell you 1,000 stories about all that stuff, but I don't do that in my book or in my life. I'm somebody that is trusting, and I thought, oh, good for you, Leonard. I would try the same thing if I was playing Spock or any other part, and I wanted to play myself again in some other thing and double my money, I would do that. But he gradually became a very good friend of mine.
The thing about this movie that I think is one of its best qualities is that it really focuses on that core trio of Shatner, Nimoy, and DeForest Kelley. And I'm wondering, like, what you observed about their relationship with each other, as well as what your relationship was with each of them.
Yes. I have to say DeForest first because he's a Southern boy like me. And I knew he was ill, but he was so stellar in what he did. When our big scene came up, he was right there and knockout there. And when I say that, being an actor, it's when you look at somebody and their eyes are alive. They're not just reading lines. They're really talking to you and thinking about it. And one of the things I learned as a really permanent part of my abilities now is how to think on camera. You know, if you're not thinking really, it's clear. The camera is really only one-on-one, but it's one-on-one for thousands. And you have to forget those thousands and just realize whoever's behind that, whoever is in that camera is who you got to convince of something. And there was a one scene where Bill said, "You are mad." And I said, "Am I? We'll see." And I smiled. And
it's such a great moment. Like, the look on your face makes it look like you are trying to figure that out yourself.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And the thought comes into a madman because he's been reached by somebody in a calm way. Oh, am I? Well, we'll see. We'll find out. Because I'm going through that fucking thing.
I love the scene with D, and I've always wondered, like, it's choreographed in a very interesting way. There's like this almost dance between both of you.
Correct. Yes.
Like, who came up with that stylistic choice?
Bill. Yeah, Bill is a good director. He's got an ego the size of Pittsburgh. No, larger. Rio de Janeiro. But he's also a fine man. He really is. And every one of those moves was choreographed by him. I'm sure he worked it out with the cameraman because you've got to do that. I think the movie breaks into two pieces. Of course, it's the first stuff with them up in Yosemite, and then it ends there too with "Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream, merrily, 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 merrily. Life is but a dream," which is how I looked at the movie. Life is but a dream. Here's this man trying to dream his way into a painless world. which if you study Zen Buddhism, you know that's a pretty fruitless and stupid way to approach life.
Right. I mean, that's the Kirk message of "I need my pain." It makes us who we are.
I need
that
my
kind
pain.
Yeah.
That's also pretty stupid, really. But but that is how a lot of us respond. I responded that way in my life for a long time. I need my pain because my life was not easy in the beginning. It's all in the book, but I kind of liked my pain, and I didn't realize that until it turned to a lot of anger at parents, of course, but and you have to solve that. And eventually, I'm almost 90, and people ask me, when did you solve it? And I say, last Tuesday.
Speaking of anger, like I think you've talked about this, and it was in the book. Was Shatner genuinely angry that you couldn't ride a horse, or just kind of annoyed by it?
He was annoyed. Yeah, no, he was not genuinely angry. No, and he fixed it. He rode the horse himself. Did you know that? Yeah.
He's a big horse guy. He loves horses.
Well, dressage.
Yeah.
And he asked, he said, he gave me instructions, go get riding lessons, and I did. I went out to Trancas on the beach, and there was this riding academy, and I rode. I took lessons, and the little horse I rode on there went around the circle, which was fine with me. And I'm learning to do the reins and all of this stuff, and not look like a fool. And eventually, the guy said, "Well, we're going to do a little jump now." I said, "Jump?" And he said, "Okay, we'll make it easy." He put a stick on the ground, and the horse went bloop, bloop, just in case, But anyway, I could not get dear old Dolly. Well, you've read the book. Obviously, you've read some of it. You saw that I could do nothing with that horse, and I was trying to get her to behave like a car. Where's the accelerator? And I know you have to kick a horse, but I didn't want to do that to Dolly.
Was it a challenge to keep the blue makeup? Because the horse was painted blue.
Yes,
right?
And she did not like it.
I don't blame her.
The wrangler said, she's fine with it. But I knew she wasn't. She told me she wasn't. Because
you're in this white robe. Like, it seemed to me like, how did you keep all that blue makeup off your white robe through all those scenes?
They fix it. They fix it onto the horse. It's not very healthy. They certainly think of that because wardrobe's very expensive.
Right.
And Bill, he said to me, "Did you take those lessons I asked you to?" I said, "Yes, sir, I did." And he said, "Well, okay. Here's what we're going to do." This was the first day. All the pressure's on the poor man. There's 70 horse wrangler traps up the hill, all horses everywhere. And the light, of course, we're losing the light from the moment the light came up. And so he said, "Yeah, okay, here's what you do." He said, "Lead the horse up here. Get off the horse. Okay, walk toward the guy." So I was about 20 steps from the guy. So that was a scene. That was a scene now. I'm off the horse. I've arrived at my location. I'm walking toward the guy. The guy's pulling out his gun. "What's he going to do?" And I put my hand on his head and said, "Let me take your pain." And he kneels down. It's a fantastic scene.
Yeah, it is. It's powerful.
But when I saw it, I said, "That's Bill on that horse."
That's when I rewatched it. I rewatched that scene after learning that from you and watched it in a different way. So you had a lot of location shooting for this movie, which I've read was very challenging. I know for Shatner it was. Like, what were the biggest challenges of those locations?
Can I read something?
Sure.
Okay, here it comes. Scene: search for God. The dark before the dawn. The atmosphere was thick, an embalming sheet wrapped around my face. As we descended into the suffocating cauldron below, I chanced uttering a few words in my language in the direction of the alien. It seemed he understood me, but I got only a perfunctory grunt in return. Maybe he knows of my intent to take over his planet, to wipe away all the misery of these poor creatures trying to survive in an inhospitable biome that could clearly support only little life as we knew it then. Only the predatory birds circling above gave any hint of life. An indomitable sun was just below the horizon, presaging the pink and orange dawn of another empty, hungry day, like the millions before it since the birth of this universe. In the age just past, life had gotten worse for the doomed inhabitants of this God-mocked, unfortunate place. I will now conquer them with love. I will take away their pain. They will follow me in my quest to find the true God. The alien and I descend from the great vehicle that has transported us to this desolate place, his home, and my chosen place to begin my benign conquest for the good of the universe. The fire planet rose like a rocket, burning all things beneath it. I was struck by its heat as if by a meteorite traveling from the back of beyond. I looked at the horizon. The reflection of gigantic volcanic peaks in the waters of a soda saline lake lay before me, still as death itself. Closer were strange, towering structures rising from the lake, wet, sand-dribbled castles made by giants. In the harsh light of another day in this hellish landscape, even the birds suddenly stopped in flight, folded their wings, and sat like avian statues. Silence. At the side of the vehicle, the alien poured out the bitter coffee from his styrofoam cup. It sizzled in the already overheated alkali dust at his feet. I said, "See you on the set." He said, "Yep," and walked away.
I love it.
I love your writing. It's
Thank you. It's I decided that just came to me. That's when you're sitting in a bus waiting to get to the set, to this location. You're thinking, who am I? What am I doing? What are my first lines? What's the point? How do I work it? All that stuff is passing through. And there were just two guys on this huge bus. And the other guy was the guy that I saved, the first guy.
Rex Holman, I think was his name.
Yes, that's correct. And he's a very good actor.
He was on the original series as well.
Oh, I didn't know that. I was actually sorry I hadn't been in the original series, but I was probably too young. I don't know when it started.
It ran from 66 to 69, 70.
Oh, yeah. No, I could have been in. I could have been in.
Yeah.
When you were shooting that culmination scene, when you meet Shakari God, what were you acting to? Was it a flashing light, and did it work out the way you thought it would? Because did they bring an actor for you to work with, to kind of work?
No, I knew who the actor was, but it was all on a screen. His God face came up on a screen.
Oh,
yeah.
So they had already recorded his stuff, and you were playing to that. Yeah,
they had recorded various endings for that character, and they finally went with the one that I think most people would recognize. This evil God, I think the shock effect for Sybok was real. It certainly was. And Leonard was over to my right, and we were finally brothers. And I knew that if I didn't do something, he was going to kill them all. I had to join this evil God in order to destroy him. That was an act of bravery that really resonated with me because in my young life, I wanted to be a hero, and I wasn't. I was very far from that. But, all the things I did in my life, particularly the one-man shows, were part of trying to join with men who sought for social justice in America. And they stood across the 20th century with ideas that had to be dealt with. And I took Sybok as that same sort of man who could have changed things had he continued with taking people's pain and not finding it necessary to get the okay of God, because that's where we are, isn't it? We're on this planet. We're on this planet. And when we talk to God, sometimes people think he answers and says things that perhaps are not so good. But I think that we're all searching for that.
Yeah. It's interesting because that's the core of the movie, and it's an enjoyable movie to watch, but it got very bad reviews, as you were mentioning.
I did.
Did it sour you at all on Hollywood because you didn't do a lot of other movies after that?
No, I did a bunch of independent movies.
Oh,
I did
okay.
one with Kathy Bates and some other people. I did one with somebody experimenting with documentaries pieced together, kind of AI, that kind of stuff. That was more interesting to me after that. I'll tell you something. It's in the book, but it really codified things for me because I got a lot of heat from Star Trek. I got I got the amount of heat that Star Trek was capable of giving an actor in those days because I did a good job. And I don't think about doing a good job. I think about doing the job.
Right.
So anyway, I was surprised. I got a call from my agent to go and visit the guy who was doing the next big, huge thing. And I'm going to sit and hear what this guy has to say about the part that they want me for, or that they're looking at me for. And I read the script, and I thought, this is another episode of Perils of Pauline, where the villain is a monster, and he kills people because he's a sadist. I have 5 children, and I'm trying to explain to them what my work was. That's why Bill and I had this accommodation about the rock gun. I didn't want to have a gun in my hand. I didn't want to do sadistic stuff, but I'm sitting there because why? It's the next big step up. And the guy said, "Have you read the script?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "What'd you think?" Now, and where I write this thing, I say, "Oh, it's wonderful, absolutely fantastic. I love your work. I really want to work with you. Please, let's go ahead and make a deal here." And I didn't say that. What I said was, I didn't like it. And he goes, "Why?" He was right to business. And I said, "Well, I transform on screen. I'm a transformer." And his eyes glazed over like ice. And he stood up and said, "Thank you very much," and then called the secretary. So I had to creep out of the room. And that was the end of my caring about Hollywood and caring about those parts. I would not want to do those parts now. And if you've offered me $1 million, I probably wouldn't do it.
Because you could have, I could see how Star Trek could have began a new era of you playing bad guys, right?
Yes, exactly.
And it sounds like you nipped that in the bud right then.
I did, and I lifted Sybok out of the bad guy category into the bad good guy, or the good bad good guy. And
he's a gray area character, which is the best kind of character.
Yeah.
And not just in that way where bad people think they're good, but he really did have what any objective person would say are good intentions.
And he had some sort of power.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he was using it for good until he stole the Enterprise.
Did you ever think about, this is just about his backstory, like, did you ever think about what made him as a Vulcan choose this emotional path, which went against his whole culture?
I don't think he chose it. He was born it somehow.
Huh.
And that's a mystery, because all that stuff is a mystery, isn't it? Nobody knows.
Right.
Backstories on some of the characters, but not on Sybok.
I mean, you said you were surprised. It's unclear, but he appears mostly dead at the end. I mean, we don't really know. So
Yeah.
were you surprised that you weren't called back, or was it just a hope that you might, get it? Because they had all the TV shows going, and were you hoping that you might get a call for one of those?
I did feel a little bit left out, yeah. But I also thought, well, who wants to take on the problem of having to spend screen time to explain how Sybok's still alive? I understood that because screen time is valuable,
Right.
Of course, that could have been done in one page scene or half a page.
I was going to say even less because they just can come
Even
up
less.
with some.
Yes,
Yep.
you could do it in two lines of dialogue and a lot of pictures.
And boom, we get Sybok back.
Yeah. And, these days, movies have no exposition. You just jump in and you're there. And you don't even ask about the past or their future. But no, I can't say I was sad or anything about it. But I did wonder that Sybok was not, because he had been accepted by the public very well and by the critics. I thought maybe that there would be somebody who would want to do a new Sybok somehow, but that didn't happen. So
the Sybok that we think is going to be coming back,
yeah,
is a younger Sybok,
right?
For a TV show where they've recast Spock. There's a actor named Ethan Peck playing Spock, and they've introduced. I guess they showed the back of his head or something. I forget.
They did. I just rewatched it. So you just see, it's definitely a profile that looks familiar. Like it looks, from the back, like a younger version of you from the movie.
But this would be like it'd be 2 decades before the movie. It would be a young Sybok.
So maybe no beard, some good hair.
Even better hair, but probably not white.
Right.
So, is this something you want to see, or, you'd be hesitant to want to see someone else play this role?
Oh, gosh, no, I'd love to see it. See what they do with it. It depends on who is doing it.
Right.
It depends because Gene Roddenberry was a special guy. And his interests in life and the discovery of morality and ethics in space was pretty unique at that time. Who was the other guy about time and all of that?
Rod Serling.
Rod Serling. Yeah, he was doing interesting scripts.
Yeah,
but the Star Trek stuff was equal to it. And I'm actually sorry I did not see the originals at the time, but because they were in their own ethos,
Right.
And people were drooling over them. And, I was busy watching NPR or something.
While the rest of us were watching I Love Lucy and Star Trek.
I want to see you do a one-man show as Sybok.
Yes.
My daughter says that.
I think it would be great.
Wow. How could I do that?
I bet you they would well, first of all, someone would have to write it, yourself possibly. But, that's something you could do. And I'm not joking about this in Las Vegas. You've been there a couple times with creation.
Right.
And they love it when the actors do something creative. They have, many of the actors can sing. Some of them can do lounge acts and comedy and karaoke.
And Shakespeare. They do all. Yeah. I think that's a great idea, and fans would love to see it.
What would they want from Sybok, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, it literally just occurred to me. I'm not ready to have the second level conversation. If you're serious about this, maybe we should talk about it later.
Yeah, I already am thinking of different perspectives.
Sure.
So it would be I mean, people would love it. And while that movie, you're right, like the movie does get criticism, but you don't. The character of Sybok doesn't, and your portrayal doesn't. It doesn't get criticism because it was so compelling.
Yeah, very interesting. Wow.
I love this idea.
What an idea.
I know that we've just basically talked about 1 year of your life. There's so much more in Affective Memories. And so, again, we'll have a link in the show notes. And I wish we could have talked to you about all of I know, Laurie, what did you want to talk to? What was
Well,
it?
I was flipping through frantically looking for information about your guest appearance on the Mary Tyler Moore Show.
Oh, yes.
And then you wrote like 2 lines and that was it.
It's a short show.
But I would love to know what your experience was with that cast working on that show, because it's a big show for me, Mary Tyler Moore Show.
Yes, the cast and crew was so good. Everybody was so smart ass and smart and funny. They just were. And I had a broken arm, which I was having to lie about. And I made up a lie that said, I had this big dog. I was at the beach. I opened the car door, let him out. I opened my door. He jumped up on the door and broke my arm. And Ted was standing there. And he said, wouldn't it have been easier to teach him to roll over and play dead?
He also, I think he said the line, Mary's guy is broken.
Yeah, right.
Not here.
Yeah. But it worked. They didn't care. And the show went so fast. It was incredible. And Mary could not have been nicer. And then there was a big party at the end of the show where all of my friends all of the older people that I knew from New York were guests, and it was
they were in that scene, the birthday party scene.
Yeah,
that's funny.
Yeah, so
it's a great scene. It is. It still holds up. It makes me laugh out loud.
Should I say anything about how people can buy my book?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay, it's available on Amazon in book form, and it's also on Kindle. But with Barnes and Noble. We just finished doing the audio, and that'll be out in July. It's been on the top seller list for, I don't know, a couple months now, in various positions. It started out in number 10, it's went to 15, it's number 25 now in the best wished for theatrical autobiographies. And it's
fantastic.
That's great.
It is great, and I'm quite surprised. But the book is an easy, good read. And my wife, who helped me edit it at the end, I said, what do you think? And she said, it's a good read.
It is. I would agree. And the writing is lovely.
Thank you.
My father would not forgive me if I didn't ask you what it was like having Lucille Ball as a mother-in-law.
That's a whole story. What's his name? Your father?
Joel
Ulster,
yeah.
Joel, baby. That's a big story. We'll have to talk about that some other time, but it had its ups and downs, I can say that.
Excellent.
Okay. Thank you so much.
I'm so glad that we had this opportunity. I mean, I can't believe I'm talking to the man who played Sybok.
Same.
Well, you are. And the same feelings are coming out of me now toward you guys that Sybok felt for the people he wanted to take the pain from.
I feel no pain right now.
Yes, you've taken our pain away.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you.
I have a sprained ankle. I forgot all about it.
Okay. That's terrific. Okay, thanks.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, that was Laurence Luckinbill. Wow.
He has a lot to say. And even more to say.
He does. And he's a lovely writer. I liked what he was reading from his book. It was very lyrical. But that was quite the conversation.
Yeah, that whole idea of a Sybok one-man show, I literally just thought of that, but I didn't have any follow-ups. I wasn't ready.
I didn't. I actually immediately thought of 2 completely different approaches. Either one would be great. So, because he obviously thought about this character a lot, still thinks about the character.
He's Mr. One Man Show. He's done lots of them for all these historical characters. So I can see it. Would you call it? It would just be Sybok, or would it be?
Oh, I'd add an exclamation mark.
I love it.
And then one day someone will do a musical. It'll be great.
I guess we should do our bits of the week.
Yeah, go ahead. You start.
Mine is, if you're a collector out there, remember last year, Master Replicas relaunched and started selling all the old Eagle Moss ships. those die-cast ships. There's hundreds of them. After Eaglemoss went out of business, Master Replicas is losing their Star Trek license. This was kind of always the plan. They had it for a little bit over a year. It ends on Tuesday, June 18th at 1 a.m. Pacific time, 4 a.m. East Coast time.
For those late night shoppers.
Exactly. Well, they're based in Britain.
Yeah, so I know.
They're doing a sale. You can get up to 60% off if you spend a lot of money. The more you spend, the more you save. And so, it's all at masterreplicas.com. There's still lots of ships available. And as part of this final sale, they are providing one of our loyal readers and listeners a free USS Enterprise D gold. A gold one.
It's pretty.
Shiny.
It is. The fat one.
Yeah, fat one. So to be eligible to win this fabulous prize, in the comment section of the article that goes up on Friday the 14th, just use the word pain or a variation of the word in honor of Sybok.
Yes.
Use a variation of the word pain in your comment. You'll be officially entered into the giveaway, and we'll let the lucky winner know by email.
That's fun. Well, mine is a little sillier than that. But this is one of my approved Delta Flyers mentions, because Tony has restricted how many times I'm allowed to talk about them. But they do, only because I want to talk about them every episode. That's why. But they, one thing they've did for Voyager, and they're doing it for Deep Space Nine now, is instead of doing a synopsis of each episode at the beginning of each thing, Garrett does a haiku and Robbie does a limerick. And so what they've done, and they used to swap, sometimes they would switch places. They've now created and published a poetry book of all of their poems from all of Voyager. I mean, they're doing new ones for Deep Space Nine now. I thought I would read the Tuvix entries, if that's okay.
Please. It's already a very literary show, so let's go for it.
So we'll be reading. So here's the haiku from Garrett about Tuvix. Tuvok and Neelix. Merged into one, it's Tuvix. Janeway separates. And now for the limerick. Tuvok and Neelix become one. The new guy on board is quite fun. Tuvix doesn't want to comply when he learns he must die. By herself, Janeway gets the job done.
Indeed she does. Well, that's it. We'll be back next week, probably, with a new guest and or topic as we head towards Star Trek Prodigy Season 2, starting in July.
Can't wait. See you next week.